Today we're going to be talking about emotional abuse, what it looks like, some examples, and just some things you need to know about it. Before we get started, I do want to say, as I always say, no victim blaming will be tolerated in the comments. If you dare to blame anyone who's been through anything like this for what's happened to them, your comment will be removed and you will be blocked. Same with playing a devil's advocate. If you feel the need to defend an abuser, you are telling on yourself you are an abuser, whether or not you are active. It is what it is, and we're not doing that. So if you do that, comments removed and you're blocked. Goodbye. So emotional abuse a lot of times can be more overt or it can be covert. Overt emotional abuse, meaning outward emotional abuse, can be things like verbal abuse, like name calling, like saying you're FAT, you're an SLUT, like those sorts of things. Obvious emotional abuse, okay? But then there's forms of emotional abuse that we don't really notice as much, or we don't understand until we're trained to understand it. So I'm here today to give you the basic training on this. There's going to be many more videos I post on emotional abuse. That is my niche. So follow me if you want to learn more, because that is what I am here to do, to empower you to be educated and aware so that you can spot it in your interpersonal life, in relationships, as well as in others. So forms of emotional abuse that are a little bit more covert. One would be silent treatment. Silent treatment is going to be a little bit more of a way that people use to manipulate without outwardly abusing you. Like, it is abuse, but they do it so quietly, quite literally quietly, that the victim is not always going to realize that it's abuse. So obviously your partner doesn't owe you like constant talking, but if you are in the middle of a conversation that is very intense, very emotional, emotions are heightened, and your partner says, you know, I need to take a minute for myself, and they don't take a minute for themselves. They take an hour. They take 4 hours. They take the rest of the day. When I was in an emotionally abusive relationship, my partner would take literal days. And at that point, that is not taking a second to collect yourself, to take a breather, to emotionally regulate. That is silent treatment, and that is cold violence, and that is covert emotional abuse, covert manipulation, because it's like, okay, you're being emotionally abused, but it's so subtle that it's like, wow, I feel like I can't speak up about this. They do this to silence you because they know that you are just gonna want to make things better. So you're either likely going to forget about what happened, like they just want you to kind of put it behind you, just be like, oh well, you know, and just pretend like it didn't happen, and you know, continue life with them as normal, which allows them to get away with what they did, what they said, the toxic things that you were holding them accountable for. Or they're trying to punish the victim. So it's like, how dare you call me out? How dare you hold me accountable? What I'm gonna do back to you is I'm just not even gonna give you my time or my presence. Now, it's one thing if someone is actually being toxic to you, to remove yourself from that situation. That is one thing, especially if you were the victim. But what they do is they like to act like they're the victim, like you're the bad guy. And a lot of times they'll expect an apology from you for holding them accountable. It's just crazy. And it's a form of emotional abuse. It's manipulative punishment, and it is not okay. So by the way, don't bring these to an abuser's attention. They're not going to change. Leave them. If you want to learn how to leave an abuser, watch my other videos. I will have a video up on that when you're seeing this, or soon after, if not already. Another covert form of emotional abuse is going to be isolation. They are going to try to isolate their victim. This is very textbook narcissist, textbook emotional abuse. What they will do is they will essentially encourage the victim to abandon healthy relationships. Keyword, healthy. Now, if your partner is encouraging you to not be friends with people who are getting into a bunch of trouble and causing a bunch of stress in your life, that's not really abuse. But if your partner is like you have good friends who make you happy, who bring joy into your life, or family members who make you happy, bring joy and peace into your life, and your partner is like, yeah, I just don't like how she texts you so much, and it's just bothersome, and like they just make up things wrong that like aren't necessarily wrong. They just make things up because they want to isolate you, get you away from those people. They're encouraging you not to be friends or have relationships with healthy relationships in your life. That can be emotional abuse, because here's the thing. Why would they want to isolate a person from healthy relationships? Tell me why. Tell me why. Yeah, they're abusing them. They don't want them to talk. They don't want them to figure out that they're being abused, because they know that if there's a healthy person in someone's life, they're going to talk some sense into them if the victim is going around being like, yeah, my partner's just doing all these weird things. Like, a sensible person who's not in an abusive relationship might be able to point it out a little better than the person who's kind of in it and say, like, oh, that sounds like abuse. So, like, an abuser is gonna want to keep them away from those relationships because that makes them feel more sane, and they don't want the victim to feel sane. They want to keep the victim in a state of confusion. And that brings me to the next one, and this is a little more overt. It's not really covert. It can be, but it's gaslighting. Gaslighting is a form of emotional abuse, and when a victim is being gaslit, the abuser is a lot of times going to use the same phrases. I mean, there's so many different ones they come up with, but it tends to just go back to the main ones, which are, and if you've been abused, you know what's coming. I don't think that happened. You're remembering that wrong. I think you have it mistaken. There's something wrong with your memory. You always remember things wrong. It didn't happen like that. You're exaggerating. You're emotional. You're getting your period. They just want to invalidate the victim, make the victim question their reality, and they want the victim to think that the victim is crazy and that they are just imagining things and taking things out of context, when in all reality, the abuser knows in the back of their mind that the victim is not crazy. The victim is the victim and the abuser is the abuser. And sometimes the abusers think that they are actually the victim, but that's another conversation. By the way, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. If something isn't making sense for you, then don't apply it where it doesn't make sense. But these are pretty textbook, so I feel like they're gonna apply to most emotional abuse situations. Another form of emotional abuse, and there are many, so we won't be able to get to all of them today, so comment other ones in the comments that you want me to talk about or that you want to discuss. But another one that is really common is humiliation. So a lot of times an abuser will get a thrill out of, well, of course, hurting the victim, but hurting the victim publicly. They'll do things that are a little bit more covert. So they'll do things like make a joke at the victim's expense, or trip the victim on purpose, or set something up the victim can run into, like somehow embarrass the victim. For me, my ex would like to tell secrets of mine to people, like stuff that was private, and he would just tell people and he would laugh about it. And it was just one of those things, like, if I reacted to that, he would look at me and like be like, you're crazy, try to make me feel like I'm the bad guy, which is gaslighting, straight up gaslighting. But the humiliation part, it was like he enjoyed hurting my feelings, but it was so lighthearted. It was just a little secret he told, just a little information people didn't need to know, but they know now. That is a form of abuse. And it's just one of those things that's a little bit covert, because it's not like they're hitting you or punching you in the face, but they're like doing something that is not okay and emotionally abusive. Another form of emotional abuse is going to be punching things, throwing things, and hitting the wall. That's emotional abuse. And the reason it is emotional abuse is because they are threatening and intimidating you. That is a threat. And I know there are some instances where people self-harm by like hitting their heads on walls and stuff. That's not really what I'm necessarily talking about. It can be a form of intimidation, but I'm mainly talking about situations where the partner is literally like so mad at the victim about something that they're punching the wall because they want to actually punch the victim, but they're not punching the victim, but they're like telling them that they will. And by the way, if you see this, it's time to go. You don't have much time left until you're the next thing that the person punches. Based off of what I've seen, a lot of DV situations, that's like the rising action. And that's not like the first thing at the bottom. That's like you're next, like in a couple days. Like, do you know you have 30 minutes? You know what I'm saying? Get out. And speaking of self-harm, there is a way that some people will use that as a form of emotional abuse. Like, if you don't do this, that, or the other, I'm going to harm myself. If you don't do this, that, or the other, like, I feel like I'm just gonna take my own life. And I'm not saying that those things can't be true. Like, someone might actually take their own life, but two things can be true at once. Stop looking at everything black and white for those of you that do, okay? There's a lot of gray areas in life, many, many gray areas in life, and one of them being, yes, a person can be suicidal or wanting to harm themselves, but also be using that to control people around them. So on that note, I'm gonna end the video here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Follow me for more emotional abuse and domestic violence related content awareness. Of course, again, victim blaming and people playing devil's advocates will not be tolerated in my comments, so do not come into my comment section and victim blame people. It is not their fault, and we can talk about reasons why victims stay in another video. But I hope you have an amazing day. Thank you for watching, and stay safe. Seriously, stay safe.